The Tarrant County Master Gardener Association has partnered with the Tarrant Regional Water District to encourage water conservation. TRWD maintains 4 area lakes and pipelines needed to provide surface water to local water treatment plants so they can clean that water to meet drinking standards for our communities. They also work with many cities in Tarrant County, such as Fort Worth, Arlington, Mansfield, and many others, to provide water conservation programs to the community. Conservation is an important water supply strategy to help meet the needs of our growing population. There are currently 2.3 million people living in Tarrant County, and this is expected to double over the next 50 years. At SaveTarrantWater.com, you can sign up for free weekly watering advice custom to your location. If you're a resident of Tarrant County, you can sign up for a free sprinkler's checkup where a licensed irrigator comes to your home, provides a comprehensive evaluation of your system with recommendations to reduce water waste. There's also an event calendar where you can find information about future classes and workshops. So be sure and check out SaveTarrantWater.com to sign up for their free services.
Today we are talking all about bees, and we will be talking briefly about native bees, but most of our talk today will be about the honeybee.
Just to give you a little background on native bees, most native bees are solitary. That means that they build their homes, and the way they live alone, unlike the honeybee that most of you are familiar with. Females, they build their nests, they lay eggs, and bring pollen in for their brood. Some of them are semi-social, so they'll socialize with other bees, but the majority of these native bees are solitary. 30% of the species, they're cavity nesters, meaning they will make their nest in soft wood and plants, crevices. Some of you might have old wood piles in your home, maybe even old tree stumps. You may actually see bees in those as well. 70% of these native bees are actually ground nesters, and they love to nest in loose soil or sand. And then how far that they're going to fly from their nest depends to some extent on their size and species. So when you see bumblebees and carpenter bees and mason bees, little tiny bees, that means that you've got a great habitat somewhere in your yard for these bees, which is a great thing.
And as we already mentioned, the European honeybee is not native to North America. As the title suggests, they were brought over by European settlers as they came to the New World, and were really an important source of food and help to the new settlers.
Okay, these are just some bits of information about the honeybees. Honeybees are considered to be a generalist bee. These bees actually meet their young and they work together. They are the only bee to feed and eat honey. They account for 80% of the crop pollination here in the United States, and they're active between 60 and 105 degrees. That means that you don't normally see bees that are flying if it is below 60 degrees. Not saying you won't see them fly, but normally they like it 60 degrees or higher in order for them to be active. And also, if you're going to access their hive, you would not want to get into a hive if it was below 60 degrees, minimum 55 degrees, because they have to keep the hive warm. They work as a group to defend the hive, and so when bees are defending their hive, especially if you're trying to take honey, they work together. So it's not unusual if you're getting into a hive, especially when they have a lot of stores of honey and they want to protect that, for a group of bees to fly out. That's what we mean when they work as a group to defend the hive. And then when you are stung by a bee, bees, the honeybee in particular, has a barb with a little point and a venom sac attached to it. So when you get stung by a bee, and if you get the barb, you need to make sure you get that out, preferably with something like a credit card, something that is hard where you can flick it out. You don't want to break the barb off into your skin, as it will continue to pump the venom, and it will just make it hurt for a bit longer.
And And as we're talking about being stung by the honeybee, here's a little did you know. Honeybees are actually the only bees that lose their stinger when they sting you. And that means that they will die after stinging you. And it also means they can only sting you once. However, because they work together in a group, it can be very dangerous when you're working in a hive because multiple bee stings can cause a severe reaction.
Okay, once you're in a hive, it's important to be able to tell the difference between the types of bees that are in the hive. But before you can tell the difference, you need to know what those are. So this is just a little chart, and you have 3 types of bees that are in a hive. You have queen bee, which you will only have one. You have the worker bees, which is exactly what it says. They are the worker bees. Those are all female bees. Then you have drone bees, and the drone bees, those are the male bees. So as you look at those, you can tell from day one to adulthood that there are definitely some different times of stages. The egg stage for all 3 is just 1 to 3 days. Okay, you'll see the egg inside the hive, and that egg will just be there 1 to 3 days. The larva stage, that's all the same as well, 4 to 9 days. But then in the pupa stage, that is when you see the difference. And the pupa stage determines what type of bee. So the queen bee, you can see that she is only in her pupa stage for 5 days. And then on day 16, she is actually a queen. Now, in order for the bees to create a queen, she has to be fed what they call royal jelly. And that's from pollen and different things that they secrete within themselves so that she can turn into the queen. Then you have the worker bees, which are the female bees, and you can tell that they are actually in their pupa stage for 10 days. So on day 21, that is when you have the majority of the other bees that are born. And then the last group are the drone bees. They take the longest to form. They look different than the other bees. They're in their pupa stage for 13 days. Then on day 24, the drones are born. When you, if you decide to become a beekeeper, you will eventually get to where you can tell within a hive the difference between worker brood and the difference between drone brood. The drone brood is bigger. It's like a popcorn kernel that pops out, whereas worker brood is flat.
And here we have a zoomed in picture of a frame inside a beehive. You can see on the right there are some cells with eggs in them. Those are those skinny little white things sitting right in the middle. And then as you look to the left, you can see what looks like a kind of half moon-shaped white worm, and that is the larva stage of the bee.
Okay, so this slide is actually showing you the drone, which is the male bee. You can see we've got a couple of pictures on here. At the very bottom of the picture, you can see going from left to right, you see the female, which is a worker bee. Once again, all worker bees are female. Then in the middle, you have the queen bee. She is longer, her wings are shorter. And then to the right, you see the drone bee. So all drone bees are fertile. They're the ones that obviously they're going to mate with the queen bee. They do not perform a hive task. They basically are just alive to mate, period. The life expectancy of a drone is 3 months, so they actually live longer than the worker bees. And like I said, the only job is to mate with a queen.
All right, and the queen bee, she is the one that gets all the attention in the hive. There is only one queen per hive, and her sole purpose is to lay the eggs and populate the hive. Queen bees can lay several thousand eggs per day, and their egg-laying ability affects the success of the hive, both now and in the future.
Okay, now we're talking about worker bees, and as we've said, they're all female, and they rule the hive. They are the decision makers of the hive. They determine the hive space. They determine the available food since they're the ones that gather it. They determine weather conditions. Is it a good time to go outside? Not a good time to go outside. They determine the health status. They are the ones that get rid of pests or intruders that actually get into the hive. They're the ones that when bees die in the hive, they fly them out and drop them in front of the hive. They determine the egg type that the queen must lay. So if they need worker bees, if they need drone bees, etc., that is determined by the worker bees. Now, their jobs include housekeepers. They have the same jobs, kind of like we humans. They're nurse bees. They're the ones that tend to the young larvae. There's advanced nurse bees. Then there's guard bees. They actually guard the front of the hive from intruders, from like other bees that might want to rob the hive of honey or of their stores. And then foragers, that's the very final stage of their life. That's, at this point in stage, the bees are becoming a little tattered. They're probably 30 days old at this point in time. And this is when they're going out and they're bringing in nectar and they're bringing in pollen.
All right, so now that we know what kind of bees are in our hive, we want to ask the all-important question, is backyard beekeeping right for you? So here are some things that you're going to want to think about before you jump in and get your bees set up. First of all, you want to know what your goal is for beekeeping. Why are you considering doing it? Some people want to have better pollination. Some might want to just help the bees. Others might be interested in extracting honey or maybe other reasons. The first and most important question is, does your city allow it? There are many cities in our area that have ordinances against it, and there are many that allow it. And you want to make sure that you know this information before you go ahead and set up your hive. Also, if you live in an HOA, you're going to want to make sure that beekeeping is allowed in your HOA rules. And then you'll also want to be a good neighbor and make sure that the people living around you and the family members in your home are going to be okay with having the bees around. Sometimes discussing it with your neighbors is just as simple as the promise of a little bit of free honey. And sometimes neighbors are really nervous. You may have to do a little bit of work to make them feel comfortable or help them feel comfortable with the idea of bees in their area. Installing a 6-foot privacy fence can be a really good way to help your neighbors feel more comfortable if you don't already have that, so that they're not seeing the actual hive. And the fence will encourage the bees to fly above that fence line as well. You also want to find out if pesticide use is common. If most of your neighbors are spraying their lawns and their gardens with pests, beekeeping is going to be a very hard thing for you to be successful with. You also want to think about whether there's enough flowers and plants and things for the bees to forage from in your local area. If you have plant material for the bees to forage on, they're probably going to do fairly well. But if most of your neighborhood is evergreen bushes and grass, things that don't flower or bloom, that's going to make it hard on your bees. Another question you're going to want to ask is, can I afford to keep bees? Really do some research and look into the costs of not only buying the equipment, but the ongoing cost of feeding and maintaining your hives. Also, you want to ask if you have the time to dedicate to the bees. You do need to be able to get into the hive about once every week or every other week, and you're going to need to do that to make sure that they stay healthy. Also, ask the question if you're physically able to tend to the bees. Sometimes those bee boxes can get very heavy, especially when they're full of honey, and you need to have the physical capability to lift those boxes safely and without hurting yourself. Also, are you allergic to bees or wasps? Even with a full suit, it is very common to be stung when you are working with your bees. So it's important that you know what your allergic reaction might be. And if you are highly allergic, beekeeping might not be the right hobby for you. You also want to have at least 2 hives. This is important because if one of your hives is struggling, you can take resources from the other to help them build back to a healthy state. If you do not have room in your yard for at least 2 hives, it might be better for you to consider another location. And also, finally, do you have a water source? Is there a bird bath, a pool, a pond, or somewhere that the bees can get water from?
Okay, before buying your bees, it is a great idea to join a local beekeeping organization. I happen to be a member of Metro Beekeepers, which is actually in Fort Worth, but there are many surrounding beekeeper organizations. There's one in Denton, there's one in Collin County, there's one in Dallas County. So it's very, very important to get involved in a beekeeping organization. It's important to take a beekeeping class. I realize that with COVID, a lot of classes have not been in person, but they have many classes that are now, they're doing via Zoom. So that would be a great resource. Find someone who is willing to mentor you. Even if someone has only been beekeeping a year or two, you learn a lot within that year, and they could be a great source to help you when you get started, or in order to help you when you're in your hive. It's oftentimes difficult to tell what the difference is between, say, brood or honey. Well, if you have a mentor there, a mentor can guide you along those lines. Try to get into a bee yard prior to purchasing bees to make sure this is what you want to do. It's very different when the very first time you get into a hive. And the first time I got into a hive, it was very alarming when all these bees flew out. So I was very thankful that I was able to go with my mentors for several months before even getting my bees. So by the time I got my bees, I was very comfortable accessing, opening the hive, and working the hive. Then you need to make sure that you order your equipment and have it ready, meaning do not wait until the last minute. For example, when you buy equipment, if you were to buy your hive boxes, and they may come where they're all together, but you would need to have them painted, and you can't just paint your box and then the next day expect to put bees in it. So you definitely need to be prepared totally by the time that your bees arrive.
And you want to think about where you're going to be placing your hives. In your property, on your yard, there are certain places that are better than others. You do want to make sure that the entrance to your hive is facing south or southeast. The reason for this is that the entrance facing the south will avoid cold northern winds from coming up and into your beehives in the winter. That will help them stay warm. And then facing south or southeast will also have the sunlight hitting your bees earlier, waking them up and getting them on the go.
Okay, planning your apiary is really important. One key thing to consider is you want to place your apiary near bee-friendly plants. And it also helps if you place them in orderly lines so that you can move with ease between your hives. You want ample space to move around your hives. Sometimes you'll need to be in front if you're putting in a feeder, maybe if you need to get rid of some weeds, etc. But you don't want everything crammed together because you want to be able to move with ease in front or behind it. If you need to and need to create a windbreak, depending where you live, then you want to make sure that you do that as well. Locating your apiary in a sunny location is best. When they're in sunny locations, that helps with some of the pests that seem to be prevalent in hives, like hive beetle, etc. Most of the time, it's best to have your hives 8 to 16 inches off the ground. You will see a lot of commercial beekeepers, they'll actually just have their hives on pallets. I actually have mine on stands, and then in some cases I get the concrete cinder blocks, and then I'll set them on the concrete cinder blocks. Mine are usually 16 inches off the ground. You want to place them away from high traffic zones. So if you have in your yard, say, a swimming pool, I don't suggest putting a beehive right next to your swimming pool. That would be a high traffic zone. And then face your hive entrances south, east, or southeast, as mentioned previously, to avoid the cold winter wind. There are several types of hives that people, quote, run. The particular one, the most popular one, is the Langstroth hive. Those are the ones that you've seen in the pictures in our presentation. Those are the hives that Rachel and I both run in our bee yard. And in the Langstroth hive, these are hives that have, each box will have 10 frames. They have the ones we use, plastic foundation in wooden or plastic frames. You can get either or, it's just preference for the beekeeper. They are wooden boxes that stack on top of one another. There are two different types of covers that you can use on these hives. You can use a migratory cover, and then you can use the telescoping cover. Now, if you use the telescoping cover, which is what I primarily use, although I do have some migratory covers, the telescoping cover also has an inner cover with it, which is just a little flat piece of wood and has an opening in the center. And these are just considered, quote, the standard hive.
So you have all of your equipment and you're ready to bring your bees home. But where exactly do you get your bees from? And it is important to reach out to your local ag extension or local beekeeping group to find out what the local bee suppliers are. Buying from reputable suppliers will always help you avoid problems such as sick hives or weak hives. And it is best to buy local because those bees that you're getting are already accustomed to the environmental conditions that we have here in this area. Now, the packaging type that your bees are going to come in are one of three typical varieties. You could have a nuke, which comes with 4, 5, or 6 frames that are already full of wax and resources for the bees as well as the bees themselves. Or you can get a package. A package is literally just a box with bees inside of it. There is no frame or comb, so it's a little bit harder on the bees to get established because they don't have any resources to start out with. You can also buy a full hive that is ready to go. And in that case, you would be buying your bottom board, your first box, and all the frames inside the box, and just taking that entire setup home with you from the bee yard. And as we've already talked about, having equipment set up for the bees when they arrive is critical.
Okay, this is what a nuke looks like. It's actually just smaller than the 10 frame box. It's just a 5 frame box. It's built the same way. It'll have a bottom board. It has the box itself. It has the frames. Sometimes there will be an inside feeder. It just depends. And then you'll have the cover, and then it also has an inner cover with it. The advantages of having a nuke is that you will already have drawn comb, meaning that the bees themselves don't have to go in there and start working just to build comb. If there is no comb, then the queen can't begin to lay. So there has to be comb first for this to happen. So that's one of the advantages of getting a nuke. Also, there's already a laying and accepted queen inside of a nuke. So if you were to purchase a nuke, you would already probably have 2 or 3 frames filled with brood. That means bees that are already capped over and that would be hatching soon. And then you'd have brood of all stages. You'd have larvae, you'd have eggs, and the brood itself. Then you can also observe the queen's laying pattern. You could see, wow, she's really laying great. The whole frame is filled with brood, which is what you would want to see from a new queen. And you would also see some honey or pollen in those frames as well. Now, disadvantages of a nuke is that late season availability might mean it struggles for winter survival. So say, for example, you bought a nuke, but you did not buy a nuke until September. That's what late season means. So if you bought a nuke in late September, it would be very difficult to increase this hive into a full 10 frame hive with another box added on top with honey stores. Also, you might have diseased comb, residual pesticides, or bee pests if you were actually getting a nuke from another hive. And then if you just left it in this without even trying to expand it, there's really not very much room for the bees to grow. So they could possibly outgrow this container, because as you can see, there are only 5 frames, and then they could swarm. And then most likely, unlikely harvest honey the first year, which you won't get a honey harvest the first year. There are several advantages to actually buying an established hive. The advantage of that, you can purchase them any time of year when they're available. It could be in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. You might possibly get a honey harvest the first year if it's already been established. That means no feeding, though. You can't be feeding them sugar water and take honey that year. You have less time spent caring for the growing colony because they're already established. And then you would know the queen's laying pattern when you purchase the hive. Now, there's a disadvantage also. You could have potential contaminated wax. You might stress the colony out when moving it. Or you might have defensive behavior because the colony has more resources to protect.
All right, so swarming is one of the biggest things that beekeepers get asked about. It's very disconcerting when people see these large clumps of bees hanging out in different areas. This usually happens in spring, and what is happening is the beehive is splitting to create another hive. Sometimes these hives are absconding, meaning they're leaving from their previous home, and sometimes, as I said, they're just splitting. If you see something like this, do not panic. These are very calm bees. They're only going to be there for a few days while they scout out a new home. And while they're there, they're not going to be actively flying or defensively protecting anything because they don't have any honey or stores to protect.
Okay, now we're actually going to head out into the apiary so you can see the type of equipment that we use. You can see the hives. We're actually going to get into a hive. We're going to show you how to set up a hive. And so we look forward to seeing you in a few minutes.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Bee Yard. My name is Rachel. I'm a master gardener since 2019 and a beekeeper since 2018. I got involved in beekeeping when my husband decided to capture a wild hive from an owl box in our yard. So we jumped in not knowing anything, and we have learned so much since.
I'm Sandra Bowen, and I am a master gardener, and I'm currently working on my citizen forestry as well. I've been a beekeeper for about 6 years now, and I got into beekeeping just because I retired from teaching and thought, why not? And so, like Rachel, I jumped in. I ordered my hives before I'd even been into a bee yard, but I had a great mentor through Metro Beekeepers Association, which I'm a member of. And I've been beekeeping ever since. And so we're actually in South Lake today at a bee yard where I have some hives, and we're going to talk to you about beekeeping.
All right, so first things first, we are going to show y'all some of the equipment that is involved in beekeeping. The first things that you will need to purchase are your hives. The hive starts with this. It's the bottom board. This one happens to be screened. You can see there's some mesh, and that allows for airflow to come up through the bottom of the hive and help the bees with ventilation. So that is the first step in your bee hive build. The next thing you'll want to do is add a base. This is called a deep. It's a little bit taller than the supers. And this is where the bees are going to lay their eggs and build their brood. After that, you'll fill your deep with frames. Some frames have a plastic board like this one, and the bees will add wax on top of this plastic board and then the queen will lay her eggs inside of that. And we have a 10 frame deep here, so 10 of these will go into your deep box.
And then there is another frame that's the wired frame, and I don't use this all the time, but a lot of beekeepers do. And this is one where you could actually get the comb, and so they would build from the top down, and this is with wired. So we just brought that to show you as well.
So once you have all 10 of your frames in, you are ready to bring your bees home. There's several ways to purchase bees, and we have talked about that in our PowerPoint presentation. So once you brought your bees home, you are going to go ahead and put your covers on and let them get established. This is an inner cover, and this is your outer cover.
It doesn't go all the way down on this particular.
And you're going to wait until your bees have filled out 8 out of the 10 frames, meaning that you have wax and brood baby bees in almost all of your frames, 8 out of 10. Once you have that, then you can go ahead and add what's called a super. The super is a little bit less deep. You can see comparatively. This super is where they're going to store the honey. The frames inside look exactly like the frames that we showed you in the deep box, and they'll be built out exactly the same way, except the bees will use these to store honey instead of for brood. Now, if you are wanting your super to be for harvesting honey, you'll need to put what's called a queen excluder in between them. This is just a mesh screen, and the holes here are too small for the queen to get through. So what that means is your queen is going to be stuck down here in your deep where you want her to be laying your eggs. And then, as they fill up the super with honey, you will know that you're not also harvesting bee eggs from the supers here when you harvest the honey. And then, again, we set our inner cover. Thank you. And our top. And we wait for the bees to fill it up with honey.
And it's always a good idea in the bee yards, which you'll see over there, we always put a rock or something to weight it down should a heavy wind come or a really crazy storm. So it's good to just have something to weight the top down. I've never had a top blow off, but because I always have a rock on it. And that's what I put on it.
And that is good practice. And now we'll move on to showing you some of the personal equipment that you'll use for safety and function when working with your bees.
Okay, so the most important thing to have is a hive tool. And so this is one that has a hook. I always usually have more than one with me because it never fails. I set one down somewhere. And it's also a good thing to have your name on them. I had my name on it and it's rubbed off, so I need to do that again because when we're working together, sometimes we end up mixing up our tools. But this is a great tool, and you can hook on the edge of the frame to pull it out. Also, this is used, which you will see when we get into the hive, for prying the boxes apart because the bees use propolis, and it's like a glue, and they will glue them together. So a hive tool, and then we have a bee brush. They look like this, and it's real fine little hairs, and this is to brush the bees off of the comb for if you're moving frames from one hive to another, if you're honey harvesting, if you just want to gently move the bees out of the way, that's what this is for. Then a smoker. They have different types of smokers, but this is essential so that you can smoke the bees. You want to over smoke them, and you'll see us do that when we get into the hives. But so you need to have a smoker so that you can smoke the bees so that they will be calm. Then there's different types of fuel. I use some pine, just some shredded pine, and then also have some of these little pellets that you can sprinkle on top, and they're like a fire starter, and so it helps them to get going. Then I also have these other little quick start. So there's just a variety of different types of fuel that you can use. If you don't want to buy fuel, you can look in your yard and get sticks and dried grass. That works well too. And I've done that before. If I've run out of fuel, I'll just look around, get some sticks, get some dried grass. Obviously, you want to have a lighting utensil, so you can use one of these. My favorite is just this little propane fuel tank and this little torch, and it seems to work really, really well. Just turn it on and light it, and then you let it smoke just for a little bit before you shut the lid. Ratchet strap. You're probably going, why a ratchet strap? Well, if you're moving hives, this won't stay together unless you ratchet it together. If you were wanting to move it, you know, any distance at all. So ratchet straps are really, really good to have with you all the time. I keep them in my truck underneath the seat. Then this right here is just some sugar water that I have mixed up because I have run out of fuel before, but I have my sugar water, and you can squirt the bees, and it will, they really can't fly when they have sugar water on them, and then they start, you know, licking off the sugar water, and so that will keep them busy while you're trying to do something. So this has come in handy before. And then this right here, so you'll see when we go over here to the hives, I have a couple that I'm feeding because they're brand new hives. I just got them in the spring, and so what we do is when we get a new hive, we feed them for the first year. So you don't take honey the first year that you have a hive. And so this right here is a front feeder, and it goes in the front of the hive. So it would just go like this, and then you would put a jar of sugar water into it, and it just turns it upside down like that. And then they'll eat it that way. That's one feeder. We do have inside feeders. I didn't bring the inside feeders. Different people do different things, and I do use inside feeders at times as well. But this one right here, I can see how much my bees are eating if it's on the front. So I like to use front feeders. And then it's very important to make sure that you are have the right equipment as far as to cover your body. I know a lot of you have seen beekeepers that don't wear anything. I'm not that beekeeper, so it's important to purchase a suit. They have different types. They have this one that's with the material. They have different types of hoods. You'll see that Rachel and I both have on a visor. That's because if you don't have on a visor, this will fall back and hit your face. And then if it's hitting your face, if the bees are flying, they can also pop you in the face. So that's why we wear a visor with our bee suits. And let's see, does yours have it?
No, it doesn't.
Mine doesn't either. So you will see that some of these, the particular suit I'm wearing today doesn't have it, but some of my other ones do. They'll have these little elastic bands which they can hook around your thumb, which I really, really like, so that way when you're working in the hive, it won't slide up on your arm. And those are really nice. So a suit, and then gloves. There's many places, many different vendors you can get your gloves. These particular ones, they are made from goat skin, and so they're a little thicker, and they will just go all the way up. So they'll go all the way up over your suit.
All right.
And
then the type of shoes that you wear is entirely up to you. The bottom of your bee suit will have an elastic, so it'll stay close to your ankle. A lot of people will just wear sneakers and socks and have this elastic down at their ankles. I'm a little more of a scaredy cat, so I like to wear boots.
mm-hmm.
And these are thick rubber, and I will just slide this over top of the boot.
Because if you tuck it in, a bee can fly down in the boot and sting you that way. And when they, you know, certain times of year, if the conditions aren't right, like it's windy today, they don't really like it when it's windy, but we're going to get in the hive anyway, so that's not going to deter us. We like it that it's windy. It'll be nice to get in there. But
right.
I think
we are ready to get in the hives, so we're going to get suited up, and we'll see you all over there.
yes. Right. We'll check each other to make sure that we're all the way zipped up and that every little hole is covered. Bees are masters at getting in small spaces. Okay, Rachel looks good. Okay. Wow.
And Sandra looks good.
Okay. Okay. We're ready to go.
We are ready to go. Hives right here. You can see the 5 separate boxes. The ones that have only one box are newer hives that we're establishing just this year. This one has multiple supers on it. This is a well-established hive, and we have actually already harvested honey from this hive this year. So we're starting by smoking the entrance to the hives. Sandra is on the back side. The entrance is facing away from us. It is good practice when you're beekeeping to stand at the back of the hive, because that way the bees aren't seeing you and becoming alerted to your presence.
And another thing, when you're setting up the hive, you want their entrance to be facing south or east. So they're facing south.
All right, which one do you want to open first?
You want to do the little ones? We're going to check our little new hives first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to crack it. Okay. Well, we might have to get our hive tools. That's really...
There we go.
Get it? Okay.
Yep.
And I'm going to add some smoke in there. Okay. Okay. And they're looking pretty good from what we can tell right now.
We don't see any pests on the top board like a hive beetle or anything like that. And we're seeing a good number of bees.
And they're pretty calm. So I'm just going to set this in here gently while we inspect the hive. So when you're looking and inspecting a hive, you can go from either way, but like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, however you want to count from whichever way. So Rachel and I are working this, and we can say, okay, we're going to look at number 2, and we'll start on the outer edge and go in due to the fact that the brood and larva will probably be closer to the middle. Whoa. Okay, this is a great one. If you look right here, all of this that's covered is brood. And you can look over here and you can see some of the larvae that's not capped. The white. These bees they're looking good. Rachel, do you see? I don't see any.
I don't see any pests. I also don't see any eggs, but they're extremely hard to see. They're very, very tiny. And with all of the bees on the frame, it can be extremely hard to spot the eggs.
Right. So we know we have brood and larva, which is definitely a good sign. And on this other side, she's laid a little bit as well.
So you can see that over here, there's some brown cappings on the openings. That's the larva that has been capped. And then there's lots and lots of cells that are open. Those are cells that the queen has either already laid eggs in or will lay eggs in.
Right. And when you see a solid pattern like this, you can see how this brood pattern is solid. That's really what you want to see. And so we want to see if we can see another one. Set this one here.
We're going to gently set that frame aside.
Because we're definitely going to have to add a box and feed this hive.
Yeah. It's very possible to inspect a hive by yourself, but it's a lot easier and it's a lot more enjoyable if you have two hands and a friend to work with you.
And so this one has brood and when you see the comb that's light like this, that is new comb. That's not old comb. And I'm looking for the queen. I don't even know if we'll see her. I looked on the other frame. These are little bees. These bees in this bee yard are Russian bees. All my other bees are Italian, but these are Russian bees. Let's see what else we see. Let's see.
And you can see that we're moving fairly slowly as we pull these frames out. That helps us keep the bees calm and not disturb them.
Now when you're looking at this frame, I don't know if you can see in here, you'll see some yellow. That is pollen. That is pollen that is stored inside of the comb. And it's not always yellow. Sometimes it'll be red, it can be lighter, orange, just depending on what they're foraging on. And then up in this top corner is actually a little bit of capped honey.
And a little trick you can use if there's something on the frame that you want to see, but there's too many bees, we can do a light blow. And it will cause them to move away so that you can see a little bit better in that particular section. So we have seen capped larvae, we've seen some larvae, and we're going to be pretty happy with this hive. They look healthy, we don't see any signs of insect or disease. So we're going to go ahead and add a super to this frame, or to this box, and then we're going to close them up.
Right. Okay, let's back up. Oops. Because as you can tell, if you look down in here, there are bees on every single frame here. So this is a very healthy new hive. Scrape this off. Set that right there.
And we've just scraped a little bit of extra comb off the top of the frames.
I'm going to go ahead and go grab.
Okay. This is just comb or wax that they've put on the top of the frames. We don't really want it there, so we went ahead and scraped it off. It didn't have any eggs or larvae, so we didn't do anything to disturb the hive with that. And now I'm just smoking them again to get them to go down into the frames so that we don't squish them when we add our super on top.
Pull the tape off the front of this. This box I'm adding, every frame in here has drawn comb, which is like gold when you're beekeeping.
And drawn comb means that they have already added wax to the plastic foundation.
So since we already have some, this is less work for the bees to do. They can automatically, the queen can start laying, they can start putting nectar and pollen in this. And I have already frozen these, so if there was anything that happened to be in there as far as a parasite, it's dead. So you can freeze these for like 48 hours and then pull them out and let them thaw out, and then they're ready to use again. Okay. And they're already moving up in the box. And then we'll put the lid back on. Okay, girls. And then I have a outside feeder on this that we've been feeding since they're new hives. And so we'll just give them another jar so they can start building their comb, since we'll be going into winter. And we want to make sure that they have stores, and they don't have a lot of honey in here. So I'm going to need to keep feeding these bees heavily before winter.
Toss that in your bucket.
Yep.
All right, should we get into one of the hives with supers?
Sure.
How about we do this one?
We'll do this one.
I'm going to go ahead and smoke the front just a little bit again. It's been a few minutes.
You want me to lift it up to them?
And we'll go ahead and smoke the top there.
And another thing, when you're doing this, if you have bees that ever start like hitting your hands, you can always smoke your hands, or if they're flying in your face, you can close your eyes and smoke your face to help them to calm down and deter them.
All right, we're gonna pop this top
We're gonna
off.
look at this super just to see if they're putting stores of honey, and we'll pull a frame out for y'all to look at. I think they are. Oh yeah. Okay, this right here is a frame of capped honey. And so all of it is capped over, so you could actually harvest this frame. I doubt I'll probably harvest any more from this hive, but because I can look in there and they haven't filled a lot of them up. They fill like maybe 1, 2, probably 5. So I'll probably just go ahead and leave this here for the winter. And so we'll probably go ahead and pull this queen excluder off today.
Are we taking both supers or just the top one?
We'll take the top one off and we'll pull this queen excluder, and then we need to go down and just see what's going on.
Whoops. Okay. Now this is sticking to the hive because of propolis. We've already mentioned that. That's the glue that the bees use to seal everything up.
You can see it closely. It comes from trees. All of this right here is not wax, it's the propolis, and it acts as a glue. Okay, this may be full of honey, which would be great, because then at least they'd have a full super of honey, and we can look, we'll just look and see if she's even laying in here. Another full frame of honey. Wow, that looks great. Yay, girls.
You can even see on this side, some of the honey is running down at the bottom. And that's not a problem.
Right. They'll just clean it up and store it somewhere else. So this super right here, I can tell, is full of honey. So this box will probably be heavy to move.
And that's another reason why it's nice to have a second pair of hands.
Yes.
Because these supers get very heavy with honey. Can you get it?
Let me see. Oh gosh. I think I can get it. Okay, let me set that down. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, now you can see some of the honey that has dripped down, and you can even see the bees eating some of that honey here. Right here, they're working to clean that up.
Now you'll notice on this box, we have 2 deeps. So 2 deeps, I switched it up this year so I could try and have 2 brood boxes. But I do have some hives that, like this one we just did, that has a deep and a medium. And you can do that as well. The honey, like I'll show you right here. So all of this is capped honey, all in here, and that's brood right there. When it's the lighter yellow brood, that's fresh brood that's just been capped over. When it's darker brown, it's older. It's getting close to hatching. And this in here, I don't know if you can tell, let's try and get out of the way, where it's shiny, that's nectar.
Oh yeah, see.
So all this up here should be nectar before it's capped. So you don't want to just take the nectar, you want it to be capped before you harvest, because it could have too much water in it, the honey. So you know if it's ready to harvest, and I'll pull this one back out. If you have frames that are like this, fully capped, you may harvest it. However, you cannot take too much. So, for example, I'm going to reference this hive. So I had 2 deep brood boxes, then I have a medium. Then I did have a honey super right here. So that means these were the brood boxes. This is all the honey for all these bees. I would want to leave that there for them for the winter. A full, at least 10 frames of honey for the winter. If I were to harvest, say this was full and this, and I left them no honey, then my bees are gonna starve in the winter and I'm gonna lose my hive. So you at least want to leave them a box or 2, depending how big your hive is, how many bees you have. So I'm not going to take any honey this year. I will not. We already harvested. Rachel and I harvested in June because I had extra honey. So I'm not going to, on these hives, take anything else. It's been a different year for honey this year. So.
Ready to close up?
Yeah. Now this end one that's really big, we could possibly get some off that. We'll just have to, you know, look and see. So really, if they're too high, that's, for me, it's too much. I'm not strong enough to pull off. If this is full of honey, it can weigh like 80 pounds. And so that's why we decided to knock them down in June by going ahead and harvesting some honey. So I think this is a good height for me, just about 5 boxes. But I've seen people that have had like 8. Yeah, it's a lot. Okay. So we can get into this one. You want to see us get into this one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, girls. We're going to see what y'all have in here. So I have a honey super right here. I'm sorry, a queen excluder. So we're going to see if these are full of honey. Just going to check them out. Let's see what's going on. So you can see they're just now building comb on this. So they're just starting to work up here. So this box is not full of honey right now. There's probably only a couple of frames of honey. This one here. Oh yeah. Okay, this is full of honey. It's dripping. And then you can see that's a great frame of honey. So they've done a good job on that. But in here, this super is not full. So what we'll do is we're going to pull the queen excluder off and just let them keep adding to it. Because we've got plenty of time before winter. Yeah, this is light. There's not even...
When a bee stings you, sometimes you feel a vibration through your glove. Not always, but sometimes.
So his mom would like to get out of here.
Yeah.
That's a warning. Okay, can you get that one?
Yeah.
I'll make sure the queen excluder doesn't come with you.
Okay. Got it? Yeah, they don't usually like it when this starts pulling off. Yeah, they're not happy. Can you smell that? Did you smell that? It kind of smells citrusy. It's their alarm pheromone, and it gets going when they're not happy, and it just was really strong. Okay, this one looks like it's quite full of honey. So you just want to go down one. I think that's full of honey. Which would be good. That means they've at least got a full super of honey. You might have to. Okay, we'll start with 3.
So you always start with 3.
2 or 3. You can start whichever one you want to.
It's just a beekeeper's habit. You can choose to start with any frame that you want. But if you get into the habit of always starting with the same frame, then you don't forget.
So this is a great brood pattern. And then you can see the larva. And then it's the same thing on this side. Okay, well, I think that one looks good, so I don't even think we need to go down anymore. Okay, girls.
Okay, build them back up.
Yep. Yeah, it's there. It's so sticky. Yeah, they're mad. I'm getting mad.
This is the hive that usually does here.
Yes. Yeah, seems like the more bees you have, the madder they get.
Your right side of the chin a little bit.
Okay.
Good?
Okay. Good.
I got a couple of things right up there. Hive bills and rushers.
Oh, here's one. So the hives look great. Success in the bee yard, no problems in this bee yard today. So we're very thankful about that.
So that concludes our time in the bee yard. Thank y'all for joining us.
Yes, if you have any questions, let us know. We can include our email or phone numbers, and we hope that all of you will want to get into beekeeping someday. It's really fun. It's a fun hobby.
Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thanks.